Okay, remember that they're changing my voice. Okay, so I was born in America, in California. There are a lot of people who are mad about Western culture in the West. Some people in the churches. Some people who are in the government. A lot of liberals. There's conservatives who are mad at, liberal culture. They're mad about the Enlightenment. There's various people mad at the majority of Western cultures, and some of them are mad at all Western cultures, and they consider their culture, which may have very well started in the West, as a culture that transcends Western culture. And I consider my culture a culture that transcends all Western cultures, though I was born in the West. So this video is titled Western Barbarism versus a Moral Multicultural Civilization. It is a response to Bibi Netanyahu's argument that his war against Hamas and whoever is a war of civilization against barbarism. Now, I do not support Hamas or ISIS or any terrorist organization. I'm on God's side, and those who do not obey God to me are not on my side where it matters most. The purpose of this video is to make it clear that there is no nation on this planet that's right with God, and nations are behaving in a way that's barbaric. During the times of the Romans, they would describe the Roman Empire as a civilized place, and that the rest of Europe was referred to basically as barbarian land. And their tribes were referred to as barbarian tribes and clans and groups. The Romans themselves were extremely barbaric. The Colosseum, their political system, they basically had an oligarchy. The rape of their slaves, they were very barbaric. Just because you build buildings and have technology doesn't mean you're civilized. I define a barbarian as someone who throws out morals and acts like a monster and terrorizes people to get their way. They often rape and kill. We'll revisit this definition later. I have 19 points here, and then I have 16 points that overkill why my war on poverty plan is correct and why the rich should pay wealth taxes. Point number 1. The people who are the most in the know in regards to the evil game that they have made know that the game is stupid and pointless. They are severely deranged and mentally ill people who run much of society, and their illness is similar to the disassociation illness of politicians. White fragility and other types of fragility causes many Republicans to play stupid about this. This is why in the Urban Dictionary the word gay was at least at one point defined as stupid and pointless. And the word gay is like the word game for a reason. The first part of the word game has the sound gay, and the second part of the word has the word me. Now, who are they referring to? Well, one need only look at politics to see who they're trying to make seem more gay than who and why. They are white, Jewish, and LGBT supremacists who want whites and Jews to seem like the most masculine in certain ways. When it comes to wearing a suit, when it comes to various activities, maybe military activities, various activities. We see the left wing as minorities in it disproportionately. And they try to make those minorities seem gayer than whites and Jews. For example, Hakeem Jeffries is the Democrat that has red on his lips, who's the most pronounced as having red on his lips. Mark Lamont Hill, I believe he works for Al Jazeera now. I think he used to work for CNN as a contributor. He also has red on his lips. And when black people have red on their lips, it sticks out more than other races, basically because they have bigger lips, generally speaking. Pretty straightforward. This is to the West's extreme shame. We see people abusing the poor and people who have less political power in their nation to try to seem more masculine, it makes them look like barbarians. It makes them look like animals. Why would they do that to people? Why prey on the vulnerable? Point number 2. Being willing to die rather than uphold the modern-day slave system is a superior way, path, and state of being. Why would the country commit to the inferior over what is superior? Point number 3. Conservatives have been arguing that things are mostly fair for a long time, even when black people had less than 0.5% of the capital, and we're 13% of America in the early 2000s or so. Now, let's stop here for a second. Am I saying that conservatives don't complain about things? No. They complain quite often. And they have their way for the most part. Things are the way they are because of conservatives. The Democrats who have more power than the other Democrats are best described as corporatists, and corporatists are basically conservatives. They're conserving the Roman agenda, which is the essence of Western culture, which is in a sense a multicultural agenda, but is first and foremost a white and Jewish conservative agenda. 1 in 10 Roman citizens were said to be Jews. So it was historically a white, Jewish, and LGBT agenda. And we have a Senate. The Romans had a Senate. We basically have a Roman system, a Greco-Roman system. Why in so many colleges are there Greek societies, Greek frats and sororities? Why aren't they English or German or Native American? Why are they Greek? Because we have a Greco-Roman system. And that's what is being conserved. Republicanism is just a specific expression of that system. So to keep things the way they are historically is to keep a left-right paradigm, which is a white, Jewish, and LGBT supremacy run paradigm. Open and shut. Any questions? Put in the comments. So when we see that black people, when they had less than 0.5% of the capital, and we're 13%, now they have maybe 4%, according to one study I've come across, or one claim, and they're about 12% of the population. Okay, which is still, they're still disproportionately poor. They said it was fair then. They say it's mostly fair now. They say if you don't like it, go somewhere else. They still say these things instead of trying to fix the system. Well, it doesn't take a genius to see that black people suffer from generational sabotage. The government, for political reasons, on record, brought crack into the poor urban communities with an emphasis on the black communities. What happens when you sabotage one community more than the other communities? They tend to make less money. They tend to be in poorer health, and that's what we're seeing basically. And certainly when it comes to less money, they sabotage them with an emphasis on causing cognitive impairment, which makes it harder to learn in the Western education system. And when you sabotage someone so badly that it causes generational harm to that degree, certainly you should pay a higher tax rate, and you should compensate them for that. Imagine if it was the other way around. Imagine if black people were in charge and they disproportionately sabotage white people. Would not white people want compensation? A lot of them like to say things, well, you know, first of all, white people aren't the bravest people. Everyone knows that, right? They're among the least brave people. I'm part white, no offense to anybody, okay? The reason why I'm brave isn't because I'm part white. If it was the other way around, they would be taking it lying down, where black people have been taking it facing their oppressor to a large degree historically. So, it's not something they should be proud of. They said, well, they wouldn't do a fucking thing. That's like Harry Potter and Jim Carrey and Pee Wee Herman saying, if Kimball Slice and Mike Tyson were in their face, that they would, it'll be a different story. No, they wouldn't do a fucking thing. So quit lying to yourself. Quit that white supremacy nonsense. Come back to reality. Reality to the white racists. Come back to reality. Thank you. Thank you. So they want to argue that it's fair. That playing stupid about generational sabotage is fair. They want to argue that because they're not all as rich as Elon Musk, that white privilege doesn't exist. And they would argue the same thing back then, when blacks were 13% of America and owned less than 0.5% of the capital because they were sabotaged more than white people. White people had the privilege collectively as a group to be sabotaged less than black people collectively. Can you imagine them trying to come up with a counter argument? What could they say? You think slavery didn't exist and didn't affect things? Didn't have a generational effect? You think segregation didn't have a generational effect? When white people refused to desegregate in the 50s and 60s, really the 60s with the Civil Rights Act, you think that they magically said, okay, let's let bygones be bygones in the 70s and 80s. I was born in the 80s. And they had to send federal troops to desegregate things in the South. And they have sympathizers all over the country. And that's just that part of white racism. When your bosses don't want to desegregate, when your potential bosses don't want to desegregate, you think it affects your opportunities in the workplace? You betcha. Now, I don't support CRT or Black Lives Matter or critical race theory or affirmative action. I have a better solution for these things. But you better believe that institutional racism is a huge problem. And the more you try to convince yourself to not believe it, the more evil and dumb you become. People have no viable counterargument to these things. In my family, for example, my father's a brain surgeon. I have a college degree. My older brother has a master's degree from Pepperdine, what was considered and probably still is considered the best business school in America. My little brother has a lot of experience in IT, has a bachelor's degree in computer science at one of the best computer science schools in the country, University of Michigan, and he has several certificates and quite a bit of experience. Everyone in my immediate family, my mother's a doctor too, including her, is sabotaged to the extreme and we're kept from being financially successful. My mom for marrying a black person, and the 4 males in my immediate family for being black. That is outrageous. Outrageous. And we live in California, the bluest state on the planet. That is outrageous. And my dad is also a top doctor and a humanitarian. Why doesn't he have a strong business network? It's called white supremacy. As they say, it's not what you know, it's who you know. If you're black, you're at a disadvantage when it comes to who you know, aren't you? For the most part, generally speaking. Point number 4. They have done studies that have shown what everyone with sense knows already, that poverty creates the conditions for people to be more tempted to do certain crimes, and everyone knows it plays out in many ways. Those ways cause people who are poor, who are conditioned by the governing class to be at an increased risk of committing certain crimes. Okay, so again, those ways that it plays out cause people who are poor, who are conditioned by the governing class, to be at an increased risk of committing certain crimes. So poverty creates the conditions for people to be more tempted to steal, to get pissed off when they're living paycheck to paycheck and assault somebody. When black people are disproportionately poor and they're disproportionately stigmatized, that increases the risk of them committing certain crimes. And so it is with any other group, Native Americans, Hispanics, poor people of any race, what have you. You have to look at the specific type and say, what is the risk for that type? And how is it playing out? You'll see that it basically lines up to a T. That's not a coincidence. When it comes to crimes committed, when it comes to selective law enforcement, when it comes to the statistics, it lines up. Point number 5. People who think that justice does not matter are very sick. Now, how do a lot of white people respond? Who led the moral relativist movement? White people, whites, Jews, LGBT. A lot of these people, are science fanatics, right? Even though scientists often fabricate studies and they don't agree on things, they have conflicting studies and contradicting studies. They say trust science, and they're basically saying throw morality out. Quite often. Now, they're not saying that every time they're saying trust science, but quite often they're implying and they're flat out saying that they want you to discard morality and just do what they say and follow them blindly. That's why Freemasons in one of their rituals blindfold the initiate, because they want you to blindly follow people who disregard morality and reinforce the social structure of society. That's why Masons have lodges everywhere in a society that cancels cultures historically, because they have been upholding the agenda of the elite for a long time. They're not people who have been masterfully facing them and outmaneuvering them and building temples anyway. No, they've been upholding that. What is a Mason? is somebody that rich people go to and say, hey, I wanted you to build this structure for me, and they give them money. They build families, they talk about bodybuilding, they build things. Religions, cultures, you name it. For the purpose of the elite's exploitation process. Point number 6, people who think that 1 in 5 Americans should be on psychiatric medications while they play stupid about the consequences of such an outrageous economy and the disgusting philosophies that created it must be from the lowest part of the gene pool, not the highest. Point number 7, by now almost every adult in America must know about the massive wealth transfer from the poorer classes to the rich that has taken place. We've had a trickle-down economy for many years, especially since Reaganomics in 1981. And the money is trickling up and not down, with nothing to show for it. They try to take credit for the pharmaceutical industry, which is really a disgrace, mind you, and the IT boom, which both of them did not need tax breaks for the rich to come into being, right? For these industries to expand and to create a bigger economy, you didn't need tax breaks for the rich. We could have built a much stronger economy without tax cuts for the rich, and a child should be able to beat a college professor in a debate on this if they're on my side of the debate. The money that goes to psych meds could have gone to housing, and a lot of the edible food farmers throw out could have been given to the poor and hungry. It was just the wrong shape and size and color, but it's still edible. Corporations have many investors, so who are those investors? They do not have to be rich people. The poor could have invested in them if they were given more money. So it takes money to make money. Yeah, for the most part, that's true. But where does it come from? It can come from 1 million poorer people instead of 100 richer people, depending on the wealth distribution. Just because Marxism is not sound doesn't mean that higher taxes for the rich and my 7-point war on poverty plan and a 10% redistribution plan over 50 years isn't sound. It is 100% sound. Still no viable counter-argument for that either. They don't have a viable counter-argument. We'll get to my 16 points, and there's more points, that overkill, that the rich should pay wealth taxes, that we should have vice taxes, what have you. We'll get to that later. Let me just finish this up. We're going over time here. Okay. So again, a barbarian is someone who throws out morals and acts like a monster and terrorizes people to get their way. They often rape and murder. The government and the politicians and their allies include the military and police, mind you, and they have shown that they fit the description, especially in recent years. They have brought down the general population for white, Jewish, and LGBT supremacy instead of helping them. Now, I bring up the military and the police not to insult them, but to highlight that these groups are supposed to be standing for the people, protecting the people. You know, we expect more for them than just blinding following orders. But part of the system is to coerce these people and to make unspoken rules, to terrorize these people. So even the military and the police, which you would expect to be, more courageous than most of the population at least, right? They're afraid to stand firm and to insist on what's morally sound. And as a result, they're just contributing to the process of bringing down the general population, as are the masses of people. Which leads me to point number 8. The Ivy League schools, the government, the social clubs, the police, the military, government workers, and more all work together to maintain controlled opposition games, which means that people basically never focus on reality. And they never get to people to rally together for a sound plan. And look at the recent speech from that Chinese lady at Harvard. Seemed like a pretty nice lady, but she was upholding the kind of sorority, kind of magic game of Harvard. It's kind of like a mocker game where they wave their hands in like a magic spell kind of motion and say, yay, yay, okay? And they aren't really serious about solving things. Now, I know that people at Harvard and other schools quite often are clear-cut nerds, okay? But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't be serious when you talk about these things. They're playing a game that is part of a psychological process that is designed to prevent people from coming into reality and rallying together for a specific and sound plan, like my 7-point war on poverty plan, my 10% redistribution plan, my global farming plan, or the plan I'm working on right now, which is a medical which is a healthcare plan that has to do with a thorough analysis. Right now it's in the analysis phase, and it may never leave that phase. A lot of people have to come together, share their experiences, share the data, do a thorough analysis, and say what's going on here exactly and what has to be done. What is it? What does it mean? What should we do? Point number 9. The gaslighting that takes place has people in a mass psychosis where they do not know how to get together and rally for what is right and throw in together and move into tiny home villages together as needed to save money and take on the government peacefully, as the government does blacklist people. They like to blame political parties, hate groups, but they work with these groups to blacklist people to maintain the governing class stranglehold on cultures, on the philosophies that you see, on the economy, on social, political, and economic life, what have you. Everyone, including the rich, need to come together and to have faith in God, and if they do not have faith in God, at least have faith in doing the right thing. A short righteous life is greater than a long conformist life. One must define righteousness correctly and consider universal pinpoint and moral precision that is scrambling to the best of your ability to be morally precise in the moral order, their true religion and or philosophy. On the issue of moral intensity and regions for people who reject universal justice, the state and the governing class failed miserably. Okay, the main culture should be a culture of universal pinpoint and moral precision. And people who want to reject that for white supremacy, Jewish supremacy, LGBT supremacy, they can live in some region without sabotaging the other regions. Because people who do that during segregation, for example, they sabotage the black region to the extreme to prevent them from showing them up. They have a serious false pride complex. If they are not going to make the country just, at least have regions for people who live in a just way where certain key centers like Santa Cruz, California are neutral places because it's the beach, because there's a theme park there, what have you. They have a sort of ritual madness as they behave like organized sexual sadists and rape by deception types. They're sadistic. 500 Americans die every day from drug overdoses, suicides, and a lack of adequate access to health care. That's about 210,000 a year. That's sadistic as hell. There's more preventable deaths here in America than that, but 500 of them die every day of extremely preventable deaths, suicides, right? For the lack of hope in the system. Most people who commit suicide, they look at the economy, they look at the state of the world, they look at their life, they look at how people treat each other in the cultures, and they just give up. That's 50,000 a year. That's almost 1,000 a week. There's over 100,000 drug overdoses. Why aren't there rehabs? Why aren't we addressing these things? 60,000 people die every year from a lack of adequate access to health care. And those three things equal 210,000 people a year. That's about 500 people dying every day. It's like a 9/11 every 5 or 6 days. That's an outrage. Why is 9/11 taken seriously, but this massacre is not taken seriously? Why don't we have a day where we reflect on drug overdoses, suicides, and a lack of adequate access to health care? It is painful to think about how people don't want to rally to me, don't want to team up with me, don't want to collaborate with me. They don't want to do it on their own. They don't want to do anything about it. I got to watch people get massacred every day. I got to know what's happening. I pass them on the street. I wonder if that person looks like a drug. I wonder if they're going to die of an overdose. I wonder if that homeless person I saw the other day is going to die in the streets of hypothermia this winter. Or die of things related to drugs or excessive heat. And if I didn't see them, it's still a tragedy. Have no doubt about that. Have no doubt about anything I've said in this. My arguments are sound. I tell the truth. I'm an honest person. Point number 11, they play a definitions game. When you look up the definition of morals, when everyone should know what is right and wrong. A lot of people have said that. Everyone knows what's right and wrong. It's not very hard to correct them when they're a little off. But you look up morals, they're arguing that the meaning of the word moral has to do with a specific context. Jewish morals, a certain faction of it, Muslim morals, right? A specific system, a specific culture's morals versus universal morals. Even when it comes to moral absolutes, they try to confuse that with the philosophy of moral absolutism. They use fancy words to confuse you about what is moral. Point number 12. Why should people with sense be made to go crazy by people who don't have sense, especially when those people pretend to have sense? They love their problem solution games, where people with a fancy degree or people with a lot of social clout pretend to save the day and they never save anything. Point number 13. The rich right are so barbaric that they need to be told that we the people means all the people. You ever heard that on the news or something? They say we the people means all the people. Can you imagine people who are so anti-democracy? They are so inhuman that they have to be reminded, they have to be told that we the people means all the people. You're not supposed to trample 500 Americans a day plus and kill them from your organized criminal neglect. I am absolutely accusing the elite and the government of organized criminal neglect, where they deliberately caused the death of 500 Americans, preventable deaths from drug overdoses, suicides, and a lack of a lack of access to health care alone. Just those three things. There's also gang violence. There's other things. Car accidents as a result of reckless cultures. There's other things. They have kill rates in mind. I'm accusing them of that. Call me a conspiracy theorist if you want, but there's an overwhelming amount of evidence, and it's very easy to solve these problems with vice taxes for rehabs, with wealth taxes, okay? And they're not doing that. Instead of just paying a little bit of money, the rich would still be rich. They choose to massacre these people instead. And the government is supposed to protect these people by having sound policies. They're not doing that. It's organized criminal neglect. And a lot of it is corporatism. Point number 14. Africans adopted Western barbarism, and their governments are proxy governments of the West and other developed nations. And so Islam, it factors into when the Islamic slave traders and Islam expanded into Africa. And then they started massacring each other. They didn't have large-scale wars in Africa, and they didn't have the philosophies that caused the large-scale wars in Africa, to that extent at least, until the West colonized Africa. When they were there, they were behaving like barbarians. When they had the proxy governments take over and pretend that they freed these African nations, barbarism is rampant. Point number 15. They refuse to effectively discuss key things like whether or not we should end homelessness. And is their plan better and worthwhile? No. Their plan and their vision for society involves massacring people, including the 500 American people who get killed every day from organized criminal neglect, and the method of murder is drug overdose. It's cultures that direct them to drug overdose, social and political and economic activities that cause them to overdose on drugs, cause them to commit suicide, and cause them to die from a lack of adequate access to health care. And I refuse to be silent about the massacre of my fellow countrymen and the massacre of people abroad as well. As 9 million people die of starvation and hunger-related issues in the world, 3 million of them children every year. With the evidence, including a president's statement, considered, we are seeing what must be basically what they have planned. There was a president said that if anything major happens in politics, you better believe it was planned that way. Something to that effect, paraphrasing. It was planned that way. Eisenhower warned us of the military-industrial complex. Kennedy said there's secret oaths, secret meetings, and secret societies, and certainly corporations fit that description, I'll tell you that. And there's other things going on, I'm sure, and my research has exposed that. Do you think 500 Americans dying every day of drug overdoses, of suicides, and a lack of lack of adequate access to health care, do you think that's a major event, a major daily event? You betcha. It was planned that way. Organized criminal neglect, organized criminal conspiracy. Point number 16. People at Ivy League schools have said that right-wingers have taunted, harassed, and intimidated them. Is that part of an organized system of criminal neglect? When you harass the opposition and you prevent the rise of true, uncontrolled opposition. Things related to the things that Bernie Sanders is talking about. When you prevent the rise of that, you prevent the rise of a fair and just solution, of a fair, just, and right solution, then you are preventing people from being saved. You're preventing the solution to 500 Americans being massacred every day from those things I talked about. Basically, you're killing them. There's a thin line between putting a gun to their head and preventing people like me from solving the problem. You're putting a gun to their head and pulling the trigger, so to speak. And I'm struggling on my words here, so let's just wrap this up here. They sabotage my videos in various ways, and I don't want to make this video about that. But I'm a victim of organized sabotage. Daily organized sabotage. Point number 17. Their policies cause people to turn to drugs. Who would have thought? Point number 18. They refuse to have an effective crackdown on the medical sector. Substance abuse causes, a great financial burden on this country. $510 billion to $720 billion or so a year. Can you imagine what we could do with that money instead? Now, a lot of the money is being spent by poor people. A lot of the money, is being, when someone dies in the emergency room, for example, and leaves a bill and no one pays it, the price of healthcare goes up. So if we can prevent people from having bad health and from substance abuse, we can save a lot of money. And we can use that money to build affordable housing and have farms and to reinforce Medi-Cal, Medicaid, Medicare, and Social Security to make sure that they have adequate funding for those programs. Point number 19. They must have set the stage for the key problems society has on purpose, and I went over that already, so I kind of got ahead of myself. Now we're way over time, so let me just shoot through the 16 points here that overkill that the rich should pay wealth taxes. Point number 1, they failed to properly wage the war on drugs and manage things correctly. Point number 2, they exploited the workforce. Now again, the rich have lobbied the government, they have a stranglehold in the politics. See Bernie Sanders' speeches. You have any questions about that? It's pretty straightforward. Point number 3, they did not provide the services needed to help people get on their feet and did not make them aware of their resources effectively enough. Point number 4, the school system is a sick joke. It's a long story about that. It has to do with how people learn, has to do with what we should be learning and what is excessive and what people can learn on their own time, has to do with giving people the job skills they need, and we need from school to work programs, and the unemployment rate would be a lot less. There'd be a lot less people on welfare. Point number 5, inmates get 3 hots in a cot. So why don't homeless people get 3 hots in a cot? They're being penalized for not being criminals. Point number 6, There are tens of trillions of dollars or so in assets and liquid wealth just sitting around and causing inflation. Because if you put that to use effectively, we could improve the economy and combat inflation. Point number 7, it costs money to clean up encampments. Point number 8, California had enough in its surplus at one point to end homelessness in the whole country, really. And they just didn't manage their money effectively. And it's because of the rich lobbying and having their way. Point number 9, if you pass my 1/10 plan, back when I recommended it, and there was a 1/10 plan of a $60 billion plan, which is not my 7-point war on poverty plan, we could have ended homelessness by now. For 50 cents on average for less than a month on average for less than millionaire taxpayers, and $20 a month on average for for more than millionaire taxpayers, for millionaires and up, and we could have built 800,000 tiny homes, a mix with the government adding government adding 100,000 homes to the process when they see how effectively we're doing. Point number 10, surplus housing reduces stress. When people know that if they go homeless, there's a tiny home for them, it reduces their stress and it helps combat suicide. Point number 11, many rich people avoid paying taxes still. Point number 12, we would have a cleaner nation. Point number 13, it would lower the crime rate. Point number 14, and rich people themselves are victims of crimes, mind you, at times. Point number 14, the world Okay, excuse me. Point number 14, there would be better mental health in the nation. Point number 15, homeless people would be cleaner, right? They wouldn't be homeless anymore. They'd be more hygienic. And point number 16, it would reduce the spread of STDs and hookers. If these points don't really do it for you, zoom in on point number 11. Many rich people avoided paying taxes. And think about inflation. If they avoided paying billions of dollars back in 2010, how much does it translate to now? And how much problem has it caused? How much, okay, they're feeling me pretty bad here, so let me end it here. Thank you.